Basically, I'm going to talk a little bit about Randy, and he's pretty much covered how we met and everything. But one thing about Randy, he's become the heart and soul of the MABRC. His enthusiasm and resourcefulness, not to mention the amount of time he spends in the field, has become one of the leaders of this group. His enthusiasm is infectious. It gets you quick. And being in the field with him is hard sometimes, because trying to keep up with him is trying to keep up with like a mountain goat. He won't let no obstacles slow him down. Briar patches, he goes right through them, no problem. But although he does most of his research alone, Randy is the ultimate team player. He's become the heart and soul of the MABRC. He's become the heart and soul of the MABRC.
The Mid-America Bigfoot Research Center. Its meteoric rise from 2006 to 2009 and the quest to be the largest and the biggest. This is a story of my affiliation with the MABRC. When you join up to an organization like this, you go in with good intentions, just to be a researcher, and then it chips away, depending on the leadership, it chips away at your character. It chips away at your backbone, and you fall in line and you do what you're told, and you go with the flow, just like everybody else. That's what happens when one man wants to be the biggest and the best.
Like, what are your dreams? What's left?
To rule the world.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen.
But there was a reddish-brown Bigfoot in the lead with a black one behind it. And on their shoulders was a calf. And the calf wasn't alive. I mean, it wasn't moving. And the calf wasn't alive. I mean, it wasn't moving.
And I think it was trying to stop the four-wheeler from smashing into the other two Bigfoot and, you know, making them drop the cow and it getting away, because it was still struggling. It was still struggling a little bit from what I could see.
And the calf wasn't alive. I mean, it wasn't moving.
It was still struggling a little bit from what I could
always respected about you is you've always been about the truth. You've always wanted to find out what the truth is.
You know, when you're 7-8 miles back up in the woods and you come across a bear footprint, it's not too likely you got humans running around barefoot up there in the woods.
Looks like we got something here. It's not very big, about maybe 7 inches, 6 inches, not much bigger than that, but there's a toe, and a toe. There's a heel, side of the foot's well defined. That's actually castable.
Based on the size, like Jim said, it's probably, 7.5 inches. If anything, it's probably maybe a 1-year-old at the most.
I mean, if you had to guess it, Darren, what's more prolific today, the Bigfoot whisperers or people just outright running hoaxes?
I would say it's probably the people doing the hoaxes. People are too damn gullible.
And I thought it was just a shadow, but then when my light come back to him, he stood up and turned around and looked at me, and I was like, holy cow.
I'd like to talk about what has been called the hate parade. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I start to hear footsteps going up behind the blazer. And I'm like, what the crap? And it stops right behind the blazer. Here comes another one walking right up behind the blazer. So I've got 3 somethings standing behind my blazer. In the field in front of me, I see 4 shadows going across the field. Well, they get to the tree line, and they stand up on 2 feet and walk in. So I sit there a little bit longer. Another group comes across, and they're in 4x4 mode. They're on all fours. They get to the same spot in the tree line. They stand up, walk in on 2 feet. I'm sitting there just totally freaking out. And then the third group comes walking across the field in 4x4 mode. Gets to the same spot, stands up, walks in.
And this is going to piss off a lot of people, but people are too damn gullible.
Everybody, I want to lay the groundwork for what this video is, what started the need for me to even put this video out showing my 8-year history with the MABRC. And I felt like it was time that I needed to lay the history and the chronological timeline out of what happened and why I left. And the reason it is so important for me to do this now is this past year, I was reached out to by a friend of mine who was involved with DW for a short while, and it involved an incident that Darren shares in his booklets, in his pamphlets. He promotes it. He talks about it at his conferences, and it's called the Grass Ball Incident. I put out a video. This lady reached out to me, and she first asked if me and DW were still friends. So it's important to notice that would be her first inquiry, is whether we're still friends, because if we were friends, she wouldn't be comfortable enough to reach out and tell me that her and her husband believed that they were hoaxed by DW in the Grass Ball Incident. And I lay all of this out in the video on my thread called The Grass Ball Incident, D.W. Lee and the Grass Ball Incident. But this is about human nature and why she didn't feel comfortable coming forward if D.W. and I were still friends. And that's what this is about. So it was after I put out the hoaxing video about the grass balls that all of a sudden I'm on DW's radar. I haven't been a part of the MABRC for 7 or 8 years, 10 years now. And so all of a sudden he's having to throw barbs and poke sticks in my direction and lay out threats. In particular, the walkie-talkie incident that I've made a video about. DW has used that, talked about it on many of his podcast. He's talked about it at conferences. He's used it to his benefit, and other people have investigated it. The day it happened, it was investigated. The day after, it was investigated by an independent source beyond us, and everything had been verified. But yet now, 15 years later, all of a sudden, after I dropped the grass ball incident video showing that he hoaxed that incident, now he's going to start throwing barbs out and hanging out these carrots for me to shut up. And these carrots are that he now is going to say that I hoaxed the walkie-talkie incidents. And I'm going to lay out all of these posts that he has made. And basically, he's just having this tucked back and saying that he won't put it out there in an attempt to get me to not say anything else about my history with him. And so that's all I need to be a catalyst for me to actually do that. First, you need to see DW's response to my video about the grass balls. He said that I've accused everyone that brings any evidence to be hoaxing, but heaven forbid you question him. He goes crazy. The grass ball incident happened with the landowner, his wife, and their youngest son. And I want you to see in there where he says, the wife, however, eventually changed her story because she has the major hots for Randy. And you will find out later, soon, he actually said that Ed Smith had the hots for me. So it's one of his go-to excuses, but it's very funny. So in response to the grass ball incident that I put out about him hoaxing, he starts looking for ways, how can I shut Randy up? So he pulls up a 15-year-old event that he had been using up to this point for his benefit, telling the story, talking about it in conferences and things like that. And it was investigated not only by me, him, everyone involved. It was also investigated by an independent source that investigated it behind our backs that we didn't even know and verified everything. So, but now all of a sudden, in response to the grass ball incident, he needs to find a way to shut me up. So he's going to put this out there. So here it is, the infamous walkie-talkie incident. This was posted a long time ago in the MABRC group. I'm reposting it here because of Randy Harrington is up to his attack tactics against me and others. There you have it. He's actually saying this is in response to my video about the hoaxing of the grass balls. I was called driver operator on the forum. So when he says DO, that's me. And he's saying, I want the MABRC members to know that those of us that were there truly believe that DO hoaxed the entire thing. Hoaxed the entire thing. I also ask that no one puts this out there publicly or even tells DO what is posted here until we can make a decision whether to go public with it or just sit on it. That's the key part. It was designed, it's not true, but it's designed to put the fear of God in me. He's going to leave it posted there, but not make it public, because he knows it'll get back to me. He knows somebody will send it to me, and that's what happened. But his goal is to shut any opposition up. Nothing that's going to tell the truth about him. This is a way to shut someone up with a threat of posting me as being a hoaxer of the walkie-talkie incident. Well, I'll tell you, folks, it wasn't hoaxed, and I didn't hoax it. And all this does is spur me on. And that is why this video is being made. Now I'm going to reveal my whole 8 years at the MABRC and the things that had to be suppressed and not talked about because it would make DW look bad. So basically what he did is repost the whole walkie-talkie incident, but he added something. He added something at the very end that said, when we arrived back at camp from Talahina, DO said he had to use the bathroom and took off alone in his Polaris on the same trails that would be attached to this event. He was gone for nearly an hour, and it wasn't necessary to go that far anyway. So he's saying that I went to the bathroom up in the mountains in the direction of where the rock cairns were found that had the walkie-talkie. He's now throwing this part in here to make it to where the flying monkeys that are around him now all of a sudden 15 years later, hey, Randy might have hoaxed this because he went to the bathroom for a long stretch of time up in the mountains, and that's when he did it. Really? That's the kind of person we're dealing with here. And this video is going to show you how and why he does the things that he does. Hey everyone, I've been putting this video together at my laptop, and it just seems so, I don't know, very difficult to put everything in chronological order and add everything in that I want to. So I thought I would do something a little different. I would just come out here, and mind you, I've got 3 dogs, so you're going to hear them go crazy every now and again. But just thought I'd come out here and sit and talk about my time at the MABRC, and then I will just splice things in as the storyline goes. So, you know, when I left the MABRC in 2015, I wanted to put it behind me because of all the things that had happened up to that point that I had to live with, that I had to hide and ignore. I just was ready to go, and so I thought I had left it that way, where you know, I told DW to remove everything about me from that site because I was actually embarrassed. At the time, I was embarrassed. I still am. I still am that my name is associated with it, and you'll understand why when this mini documentary is done. But so I told him to take all my stuff off and remove my researcher page and all the stuff. Of course, when I was gone, he was like, slammed the door. So I couldn't know what is there or what is not there. But told him not to mention my name. I said, don't even mention my name. That's how done I was with it. Well, so, you know, years have gone by, and, you know, DW hasn't honored any of that. So, you know, he's kept my stuff on there. He uses it to recruit other people, and then he throws little jabs out at me. Whenever he's given a podcast or doing an interview, he'll throw in things because he knows it'll get under my skin. For instance, these are the type of things that I have to deal with occasionally with DW. Last year, I did a podcast interview. I hadn't done one in a long time, so I had this set up to do. They made an announcement about it, and then the gentleman contacted me and said that DW had reached out to him and said that if they interviewed me, that DW would boycott and get the MABRC to boycott their radio show. So they tried to get me booted before the show was even on. And of course, I had to redact their names so that no one would know who they are. But if DW catch wind of this, and I'm sure he will watch this, he will know exactly which podcast I'm talking about. And if you are watching this, DW, you are a sack of crap for pulling that kind of stuff. To pull people into your hatred for me by messing with their livelihood like a podcast is a really low-life scumbag thing to do. And so he, for instance, I finally got around to reading his interpretation of the Ed Smith fiasco, and which lasted about 4 years. And it's funny how now he's adding in there, it's a little jab, but he'll add in there, you know, Ed Smith was a homosexual, and I discovered that at the end of everyone, of that whole saga, at the very end, it was something I uncovered in a phone call with him by accident. And so now the scenario is from DW that for 4 years or longer, with all the technical data and all the conversations that he had with DW, over the course of 4 years, the reason that he did that is because he had the hots for me. So, and it's just funny that that's also what DW says about the grass ball incident, which I knew was fake the moment he said he presented the grass ball incident as a happening. It happened on some people's property who were friends of mine, matter of fact, I became friends with them before DW did. They reached out to me when I was in town. I was wearing a fire department sweatshirt, and I was at a restaurant in town, and I was staying in a hotel before going out to do some research. And when I got to the hotel, there was a message for me at the desk. It's the only hotel in town. I mean, there's maybe a motel, but this was the only hotel. And there was a message for me at the desk, and I was like, that's odd. Who even knows I'm here? And it was because they saw me in a restaurant, and I was talking to someone about Sasquatch. And so they snooped around and left a message at a hotel, and that's how I got a message to talk to these people. And it was, her name was Deb Tate, and her husband Mike. You know, I became friends with her 3 sons. Went out there multiple times. One time my Polaris got swamped in the deep water on that Lee Creek, and Mike came down and saved me and towed me out. And so we were friends. So it's funny how what DW has received from me being a part of his life. When I first came on board there, late 2006, and he got information, and it's ironic that the very first reason that DW and I even met over the phone was because he put some information online stating it as fact that was not true. And I had to contact him and correct him. The stuff that he had put down about my Chickasaw Park encounter and the Ridgewalker video up in the Kiamichis, he put some wrong information on that, but he posted it as it was a fact. That's going to be something that comes into play throughout this whole story. DW will do stuff like that. Change the storyline, throw in what he wants to throw in, manipulate the truth. That's going to be a common theme. So I contacted him, corrected the information that, and consequently we became friends. Now, DW is a nice guy. He can come across as extremely nice and pleasant. But I'm going to show you all kinds of stuff where he likes to argue constantly. You have never seen someone who argues with so many different people. And I got caught up in that when I was with him. My God, there were fights. We fought with so many people. And ever since I've been gone, now I know that he was that nucleus of constant arguing. So 2005 or 2006, late 2006, he asked me to join. And at that time it was the Green Country Bigfoot Research or something like that. And he made these little cards for members. And there were what, 10 members or less? I mean, so at the very beginning, so I got my Green Country card. I was feeling all important. I mean, remember, I was new to this game, and this was right after this was just several months after my Chickasaw Park encounter. So yeah, I mean, I was looking for people that I could do this with because I was ready to learn. I want to see what's going on out there. So we converged at that moment, you know, because that's just, you know, I was looking, and obviously he was looking too. But what I didn't know is what he brought to the table at that time. I didn't know. I was like, this guy's a website guy, so he must have good stuff. He's an IT guy. His profession is IT, so he knows he can back channel into a lot of things on the internet. I was non-internet tech at all back then. I mean, I know so much more now than I knew then. It's like night and day. But so joined up with him, and almost immediately people started joining in. And he decided to change it into Mid-America Bigfoot Research, which just encompassed 4 states. The Kansas was because of me, of course Oklahoma, Arkansas, and I think Missouri. So it was just little 4 states. So he had a picture of the United States with those 4 states in red. So that's where it all started. So if there was one person in Missouri, then he would put that on the state or on his map. And so over the next course of several months, people started joining in. But I didn't all I wanted was a place that I could hang out with other researchers and talk about Bigfoot. That's all I wanted to do. So I asked him to set me up a page where I could just report to myself like a blog within the MABRC. So it was a researcher's blog, and when I'd go out, because most of the time I'd go out alone, I would just report back into my blog, and then people could follow what was happening. Hey, I went out there today, here's what I saw, here's what I did, here's the results. And then so it was like an ongoing blog every time someone would go out. And then other people started getting on board with that. So you'd start getting other researchers there who would do their own blogs. So you could go in there and just click on anybody's research and chronological order, see how things were going along. At that point, I had interactions with a gentleman named Doug Bilby. You guys have probably seen my videos on Doug Bilby. We became friends. I stopped by his house. I drove there to look at some pictures that he had on game cams. We became instant friends, and you guys will see that that's the way I am. I can become friends with people. I try to be honest, and it's funny I say that because throughout the course of being at the MABRC, I had to be dishonest by letting so many things slide. But in my general day-to-day with other people, honesty and sincerity. So me and Bulletmaker became fast friends. That even Steve Coles, everybody knows Steve Coles, Squatch Detective. You know, he and DW were buddies online, and when I said I was going to go to Bulletmaker's place to look at some photographs, Steve Coles reached out to me and wanted to know if I would represent him, if I would go and do this as a researcher of his. And it struck me as being so odd. I thought to myself, what, dude, you're up in New York. Why? That doesn't make any sense to me. But as a business aspect, and let me tell you, Steve's in it as a business. He's not into it, you know, you can just tell by looking in the repetitive videos of nothingness that it's a business. But even back then, he wanted me to represent him on site of Bulletmakers so I can look at the photographs and stuff like that. I did it, but it struck me as being odd. And just to throw this in here, just to give you the nature of DW, and since we are talking about Steve Coles at that time, we were all friends working together. But the moment Steve Coles went off and worked for Tom Biscardi, this is the post that DW makes to remind everybody that you know, this is what DW is like. Don't do anything that goes against him. Don't say anything against him. Don't rub him the wrong way, or he'll put things like this out. And so I started going out there a few times, and before you know it, I had to introduce, I didn't have to, I wanted to, I introduced DW to Bulletmaker. We started bringing other people out there, and so, you know, there was an advantage where he was kind of using me to go to places. At that time, DW only went to one place, which was about 10 minutes from his house. He called it Skillyville. Going into 4 years of going down to the Kiamichis, and so DW and them started going down there with me. Of course, I would go to the Chickasaw Park where I had my original encounter. DW and them would start going with me down there. So you got these 3 areas that I brought to the table that he would not only start going himself, but taking other people and making expeditions out of it, much like the BFRO expeditions. And I didn't care. Yeah, I've never been one to hide where I go. I want people to go, so that wasn't a big deal. The reason I'm mentioning it now is because now, in 2025, 2024, he makes snide comments that I wouldn't have even been down to the Honubby area if it wasn't for him. Really? So we get down there in around 2006, 2007, and I told DW about the festival. The festival that I started going to. I think I went to the first one in 2004. And so we approached the Chamber of Commerce, who ran the festival, some lady, and asked if we could help turn it into a conference along with the festival. So that's how it started. And so indeed, it was the MABRC that set that up, the conference portion. And we did that for 3 years, maybe 4 years, 3 years, 4 years. But it didn't take long for DW to get into a big scuffle with the lady that ran things. And next thing you know, we were done. And so DW gets a case of the ass. And Troy Hudson, who moved in down there, of course, that had to be DW's next enemy. So there's a lot of infighting around that, a lot of fighting for a couple of years, and just the silliness. So the fighting got us booted out, and he picked enemies with everybody. So that was a chapter that was over with. So we got these areas now that we're all going to all the time, twice a year, 3 times a year to bullet makers, a couple times a year down to the Kiamichis, squeezing in whatever you can. We'd go down to the Chickasaw Park. So Darren brings one area to the table, Skillyville. I bring these 3 areas, and you'll see that if you go back and do some prying on your own, you'll see that he never went anywhere from 1991 is when he started, all the way up to 2006. He went 10 minutes from his home. And then after that, after I came on board, all of a sudden the itinerary is lined up with trips down to the Kiamichi, trips to bullet makers, trips to the Kiamichi, or trips to Chickasaw Park, and expeditions, and let's lay out the expedition plans. And so I realize now that I've looked back and starting to put all these things together, that he was using me. He clearly used me. That's why it ended so badly when it did end. So first I want to show a bunch of clips of the way he and others thought of me at that time, what I was contributing, because it contradicts what he says now. What he says now is, oh, they couldn't wait to get rid of me. That I was narcissistic, and just on and on and on, trying to vilify me for standing up to his lies.
And of course, we got our website going and started putting information up there. And that's how me and Randy first crossed paths. He called to talk to me about, I had posted information about the the Ridgewalker video. And he would just call him to point out a few things that wasn't correct about what I posted. And we talked for probably 30 or 45 minutes. Basically, I'm going to talk a little bit about Randy, and he's pretty much covered how we met and everything. But one thing about Randy, he's become the heart and soul of the MABRC. His enthusiasm and resourcefulness, not to mention the amount of time he spends in the field, has become one of the leaders of this group. His enthusiasm is infectious. It gets you quick. And being in the field with him is so hard sometimes, because trying to keep up with him is trying to keep up with like a mountain goat. He won't let no obstacles slow him down. Briar patches, he goes right through them, no problem. Sometimes I have to say, whoa, wait a minute, we got to go around this way or whatever. But although he does most of his research alone, Randy is the ultimate team player.
I'd like to thank any of you that wasn't here a while ago to the 2008 Bigfoot Conference. This next gentleman, he's a Mid-American Bigfoot Research Center, senior field researcher. I think everybody in our group has a lot of respect for him. He's the only one brave enough to go out in the woods by himself. He usually goes back 10, 15 miles back where nobody else goes. He's been a real asset to the group. I think all of our guys will follow him anywhere he goes. So I want to turn it over to Randy Harrington. He goes by the name driver operator.
Here's a podcast I did with Mark Newble. I believe it was somewhere around 2020. And this is where I learned that indeed DW never did remove my stuff from the MABRC. He just made it to where I couldn't see it. So this is where I learned that DW wasn't good on his word. And you will hear Mark Newble say that he was sick. And for a year while he was sick, he was able to study my blog on the MABRC because he was a MABRC member at that time, and consequently since then has left the organization and of course has been vilified by DW, just like his pattern.
And I was recovering from a health issue. I used to work swing shift on a 7-day rotation, and I got sick and went into a coma, and I was off work for almost a year. And I had an interest in Bigfoot. And this was one of the first stories that I heard, encounters. And it motivated me that I need to get myself well, because this is what I want to do. I want to get out in those woods and see one. And I just really thank you for telling that story, Randy, because it's one of my all-time favorite encounter stories. It's just...
Well, hardly a day goes by that it doesn't cross my mind in some fashion. His goal is to pile up a bunch of flying monkeys around him that under no circumstances will go against him. I was the whisperer in his ear all the time, and he was okay with that, because I wasn't interested in climbing up the ladder of his organization. I just wanted to hang out with other researchers and share the stuff, and that's what I did. So I wasn't interested in doing that, and so, but he would take advice. He would actually, before if he'd make a big long post about something, he'd let me read it. I mean, we were friends. We were good friends. I'm talking now like we're not friends, because we're not. But then we were really good friends. He was very nice, but there were behavioral issues that come into play. And so he would make a long post about something, and he would let me read it. He'd say, what do you think about this? And almost every time he'd give me something to read, it was full of him patting himself on the back about something or another. Oh, look at me. And I would tell him, I said, Darren, I said, you got to quit bragging on yourself. You got to quit talking about yourself. I said, you need to let other people brag about you. You just do your work hard, and if you're doing good and you're honest and good, then other people will brag about you for you. You don't have to do it yourself. But he was always fluffing himself up, and I'm this and I'm that and I'm an old timer, and you need to respect the old timers, I'm like, you got to quit that rhetoric. That it turns people off. And you can see that when I left, there was nobody there that stopped that behavior. So that's just the way he is naturally. But when I was there, it was curtailed because I would always push him in a different direction and how to respond to people and things like that. So so then let's see that time frame. So okay, so we started going out to Bullet Maker's place, and eventually there was a guy named Old Bub, Steve Sumner. You know, he came in, we took him out to Bullet Maker's place. Next thing you know, DW's in a big old fight with them, and it lasts for years. The fights would last for years. He would never be able to concede, you know what, I was wrong. You know, I shouldn't have said that, or whatever. It's just he would lock his feet on the ground, draw a line in the sand, and then just argue. That's just what he likes to do. Steve Sumner, they got in a big fight. Another guy named John. Those fights lasted forever. And next thing you know, we get in a big fight with Bullet Maker. But Bullet Maker himself said, and I will show the quote, where he called DW a hoaxer. We all knew he was a hoaxer. There's some things that happened out at Bullet Makers in the bean field that I would like to address. One time we were out there, and DW had a tent with the aluminum poles that were over the exoskeleton of an older tent that had the aluminum poles, where the tent just hung from the poles. Well, the wind was blowing that night. You know, of course the tents weren't staked down, and so the wind was blowing, and it lifted up a corner of DW's tent. The wind did. And of course the next day it was, Bigfoot came and picked up my tent, and man, it lifted up in the air, and just my ass in the middle, and it turned into this huge story of a Bigfoot trying to pick up his tent. But what he doesn't know is that I'm very analytical, and so I let him tell his story, and we're all like, oh wow, man, oh, even though he's the only one having these experiences. So I go over and I just examine the tent. Why he didn't examine the tent, why other people didn't examine the tent, I had to sneak over and examine it. And I'm just looking at it, and I came to the conclusion that it was the wind. And the reason I know it was the wind is because of the way the poles are stuck together from the top down into a skinnier pole, and the weight of the tent is hanging on those. So if it was picked up, the poles would have separated. If the weight was pulled upwards rather than gravity holding it together, they would have all separated. So it was the wind blowing up from the bottom rather than something from the top lifting it up. Very easy to look at and see, but the story was already out. So once the story is out, DW is the type who will tell the story first and then deal with the details later. He'll tweak the story to make the details work for him, but he first lays out a story that sometimes doesn't make any sense, with no regards to whether it makes sense or not. And this is going to be a common theme. The next thing that happened, that I was involved with all of these, but the next thing that happened, we were out there having an expedition, and Big Jim, he claimed to see a Bigfoot belly crawling across bean fields towards in our direction. Him and DW both, oh yeah, belly crawling, there's one belly crawling. And here's the part that my logic was like, what in the hell? Jim says, it's going towards my truck, and I've got my ice chest out on that side of the truck. So Big Jim goes over and puts his ice chest in the truck with the mindset that I don't want that Bigfoot coming over and stealing my ice chest. And I'm thinking to myself, why would you not want to sacrifice your ice chest for this to come on in? If that's what you think it is, come on in and we can see it. better, or we can see it when it gets over there to your ice chest. The whole storyline is so ridiculous that he would go over and put his ice chest, secure it in the vehicle because he was worried about the Bigfoot, which we're all there to see a Bigfoot, but he wants to stop that one from coming in to get his ice chest. Didn't make any sense to me. So I immediately got on my four-wheeler and took off across the field. And at the time, if I could believe them, there should be a Bigfoot out there laying out there that had been belly crawling in that direction. And I thought, well, I turned on my four-wheeler and just took off, started zigzagging all across that field. I expected to hit something, but it never happened. There was nothing in the field. So that whole storyline was based on what? And it started to show a pattern of create these fantastical stories. Everyone at camp is all amped up. Man, DW saw another one. DW saw another one, and that was the basis of his business plan. His business plan is to create stuff, have everyone at camp, and then have our expeditions be these fantastical things that full of Bigfoots. So there was another thing that happened so the tent being lifted up was one that I had conversations with Bullet Maker about, and then the next one is going to be the ape parade. So, you know, let's hear DW's story about the ape parade, and then I'll tell you my version. You know, I was in that field too, and I had a $3,500 night vision scope. It's the most expensive one I could buy at the time, and it was the highest tech that that was available. I don't even think we had thermals at that point, so I was going night vision. So I'm in my trailer in one corner of the field, and I could see across the whole field with my thermal camera stuck in that hole in or my night vision camera. And so the story of him in the ape parade going across that field, it never happened. Even the stuff that he claims happened after that, it never happened. And we will evaluate his story about that. And he was saying that rocks and stuff were hitting my box, the little trailer that I was in. That's not what happened. But it was one of those things where you had to be in the MABRC is you let him tell his stories, and you didn't step out of line by questioning them. I mean, he made that clear, and you should see that that's part of his mannerisms now. I mean, look what he's doing to me, vilifying me, trying to paint me into, you know, being a bad guy. So the ape parade was a big one, and then not too long after that with the Ed Smith stuff and the problems with Bullet Maker and Ed Smith and DW. DW is a big problem. But of course, when DW tells the story of the whole fiasco about Ed Smith and Bullet Maker coming to a head, he tells lies about that too. So I'll address some of those lies. It's all about painting himself in a picture of light while vilifying everyone else around him. That's one way that he elevates himself. So there were lots of lies that DW told about the Bullet Maker and Ed Smith stuff, and I'll get into those later. But so that eventually came to an end. So from that moment on, Bullet Maker was the bad guy. And so one of the next events that I do want to talk about is the two Sasquatch carrying a cow and picked him up on his four-wheeler. I was there 7 days. 7 days after that, I was down in that area camping by myself, and there was a field back in behind Lee Creek. I guess it's probably 25, 30 acre field with a fence, you know, with woods, and that's where they had some cattle. And sometimes when we'd be down there, you'd see this flatbed truck pull down through the creek and go up the old, you know, the service road to get back into that field and take some hay or some feed to that group of cattle. So of course DW is claiming right back there is where he had an encounter where he saw two Sasquatch carrying a steer, a 400 or 500 pound steer. And so I just went back down there and camped, and when the flatbed truck came through, they would be the ones that would know whether or not there's any cattle missing or not. And I asked him, I said, hey man, I said, do you have any steers missing or any cattle? And he's like, he said, not that I know of. I said, well, how easy would it be to know? He said, well, it wouldn't be easy. He said, because they're, he said they probably had a 30 or 40 head cattle herd back in there, and it's not easy to count. At any given moment, you go in there and they're dispersed all over, all over through that field in different places and places you can't see. To take a head count is not an easy thing to do. So anyways, needless to say, so we're going to go over DW's story, and then I'm going to break it down afterwards. And when Big Jim first came on the scene, he was we heard him on a radio show for a podcast where he was talking about being down in the Kreiner, Oklahoma area, and Sasquatch activity. And so I'm not exactly sure on all of the details, but I do know the conversations that DW and I had after that. But DW got a hold of him, and he was giddy like a little girl. DW was, because he was like, oh yeah, he's going to join our group, talking about Big Jim. And he goes, and old Bub, old Bub and them were trying to get their claws in him, but we got him. So it was a competition thing with somebody that he was already fighting with, old Bub, and the guy that we took out to Bullet Maker's place, and then shortly thereafter, DW and them, got into a big old fight. So he was very giddy about, we got Big Jim, and I remember we were doing our little radio show podcast at the time, and there was one night we went live, or Big Jim, the Bigfoots were tearing off the doors of his wheelhouse, of his well house, and the Bigfoots were all over the place, and down in his area, and just, it was incredibly fantastical. I'm afraid just rip the door off, and just it's almost like when him and DW get together, they're like dueling banjos. Who can and then it's Bigfoot's rainbows and Bigfoots, and falling out of trees, and it's like they're trying to outdo each other for attention. And so Big Jim had his own research spot on that same part of the forum where we all posted our research, and he started finding footprints. And I remember at the time, one of the first footprints that he was claiming was a footprint was just over a fence that had a pathway going along the fence that had cattle, and you could see a muddy, when mud dries up, especially where cattle are involved walking along a fence, it's a very scuffed up, marked up pathway, and then it dries, and then it re-wets at each rain, more cattle walk through, and it's just, I've lived on a farm, I know. We've had cattle, horses. I was raised doing all the work, and only son, I did all the work. So I'm familiar with cattle prints and all that kind of stuff. So Big Jim looked over the fence and claimed, well, he claims a Bigfoot climbing over the fence there, and he took a picture. What it was water had settled into a puddle of nothing but cow hoof prints. Cows, of course, have split hoofs. So you've got all of these prints smashed down into and as the water was settling into this pool, it just so happened to settle into a configuration that kind of resembled, it looked like a foot. And at the top end of that was two of the prongs from a split hoof, from the cattle, a split hoof. And they happened to just be positioned in a way that you could think that they might resemble toes. But it was the split hoofs. The whole track, the whole puddle was littered with hoof prints. And it just so happened that this configuration might have looked like a foot. So you and I brought that out on the thread. I said, look, I said, you could see the two, I said, those two split hoof that you're calling toes match all of the rest of these split hoof prints in this puddle. And of course, him and DW both didn't like that logical response. But that's the beginning of Big Jim selling a Bigfoot print that wasn't a Bigfoot print. But he got a lot of attention over it because I was the only one who said that those are cow prints in a mud hole. Everyone else was, oh man, ooh, they're right next to your house. You got a Bigfoot there. There's Bigfoot. You have to understand human nature. Big Jim, that's when he locked in. It made him feel good. It made him feel good to get that attention. So he became a Bigfoot footprint guy, and it unfolds. That is the reason I ended up leaving in 2015, because of his footprints. So we'll get into that. We'll get into the progression of his footprints and his finds and big boy trails, and just, I'm embarrassed. I still wish that my name wasn't involved with them. But so I'm going to lay out, and this will be the catalyst to why I end up leaving. And it's a convoluted story full of ins and outs and people jabbering. But to me, it's just based on one thing: fake footprints. And I'd had enough, so I left. So that's the Big Jim scenario. More than once, Big Jim would show up and didn't even have enough money to go home, and I'd have to give him gas money. So that's just to give you the idea of the dynamics, the personal dynamics. To show up knowing that you didn't even have enough money to leave, that you would have to get gas or money from somebody. And so I seem to have always be the one that was divvying out money to people that needed their tires fixed, their gas. Or there were people that showed up that couldn't even eat. Who ended up paying for them to eat, down in Honubby and stuff like that? Me. And I blame myself, because I'm a giver, and I give. And once I started giving, I became that person to them. And they thought what they give to the equation or the group dynamics is always having these Bigfoot stories. So that was their contribution, whether made up or not. Like I said, when Big Jim and DW would get together, it was like dueling banjos. Big Jim would be like, one touched me in the back of my truck. I was sleeping in the back of my truck, and one came up and touched me. And between him and DW, it's just hilarious. You could see the dynamics. And this is where you're going to say, man, why do you got to be hurtful? I'm not trying to be hurtful. I'm trying to be realistic as to where this all stems from. The attention seeking, the being okay with telling lies to because you need that pat on the back. And I mean, him and DW both morbidly obese. They can't walk 50 feet without gasping for breath. I don't even know if Big Jim's a real biologist or not. I've never seen his diploma. I would be concerned whether he's telling the truth, because the whole time that I've known him, he's worked at a grocery store. Rather than taking that scientific degree and doing something with it, show me your motivation. Instead, he spent his whole life mired in a grocery store employment. That doesn't make any sense to me. 400 plus pounds. Somebody told me that they went to his house, and the story is a sad, lonely person with no girlfriend, and you have to, as sad as that is, you have to know that you have to account for that. Is that the reasons why he's doing what he's doing? Because it makes him feel good, it makes him feel important, makes him feel, everybody adores him. He's the Bigfoot footprint guru. And DW's the same. Those have to be taken into account. I used to ask DW all the time. I'd call him and I'd be like, where you at? Where you at? Well, I'm at the drive-thru in McDonald's. There were so many times I would call him out of the blue and he'd be sitting in the drive-thru at McDonald's. And there were times I would tell him, I was like, Darren. I mean, I felt like we were good enough friends at the time that, and I had corrected him on a lot of his approaches with patting himself on the back. So he was open to these discussions. I would say, look, man, you have got to get into shape. I said, you are not going to be able to sell yourself to intelligent people that you're a solid researcher if you look the way you look. I said, you have to show some discipline. I don't see how the stories that he tells, I run after him and I go after him in the bush, I go after him in the, I chase after him, I was running uphill after one. None of those stories fit his body. He'd wrecked the four-wheeler so many times. He'd wrecked and broke his leg, wrecked and broke his foot. One time we were all crossing a creek on four-wheelers, and on the back side of the creek, it was just a little 6-inch updrop where you had to climb up over just a little 6-inch bump out of the creek on the far side. We all go across, 3 or 4 people go across, and then when it's DW's turn, he hits that, the four-wheeler flops over sideways and he's laying in the creek. He's so top heavy and he's non-athletic. He doesn't know how to position his weight when a four-wheeler's shifting one way to shift his weight. It's like he doesn't know any of that. There's no sensibility. He was wrecking the four-wheeler all the time. And I remember the story when he wrecked his four-wheeler and broke his ankle, and they carted him back to camp, and he had to go into town and emergency room and broke his ankle. And I was there. I remember the whole thing. But what he also did was he tweaked the story, because in order to tweak the story, you go from being a dumbass who doesn't know how to drive a four-wheeler at all to it went from just wrecking, where he was going through some grass and he hit a stump or a log or something and flipped and broke his ankle. That's how the story was, because I heard the story. But when the story was reported, he was avoiding hitting a small animal. There was a small animal that he tried to avoid hitting a small animal and wrecked. So he learns to tweak the stories enough to where they're not true, but he becomes a hero, because he wasn't gonna run over that small animal. So you'll find that tweaking the facts are no big deal to him. Changing the story is no big deal to him. He will put out a story and then deal with the details later. And if they don't make sense, he tweaks it just enough to try to give it some sense. That's what I would call a habitual liar. So yeah, I'm sure we're going to cover some of those things in here. But yeah, it's all about him and Big Jim are probably two of the most prolific hoaxers that I have ever come in contact with. And I let it slide, even though I knew the truth, because I was also a part of, by letting it slide made me a part of it. That's what it's like over there. The organization itself is, I'm going to make a video talking about the organization and the parts that I was involved in of setting it up the way we did. This little section here, I'm going to talk about the organizational structure. And I was a part of all this. Remember, I was there when it was Green Country Bigfoot Research, and then it transferred over to the MABRC. You got to understand, DW, he wanted it to be the biggest and the baddest place where everybody wanted to go. Even in the Ed Smith stuff, where he said, I cannot confirm whether it did happen or didn't happen. He and I had a discussion about how he was to respond, and our exact discussion was, what could he say that would get more people over to the website, and not just the forum, but sign up to get into the members section. So it was all about dangling carrots out there and creating situations. So we talked about, I said, well, say that you can not confirm or deny about the Ed Smith stuff. I said, say that you can't confirm or deny, and that will make people think that you do know, that you must have signed an NDA or something like that. He likes to play off like, I said that because I really just really couldn't confirm or deny. He's so full of shit. We had a discussion about what to say. I'm the one who came up with him saying that. I was a big part of all of the entrappings of building up the membership. I was vested in it. I mean, that's what DW wanted, and that's what you do when you're with him. You give him what he wants. I'm ashamed to say, yes. So, but when it came to switching over from Green Country to the forum, the only other forums out there was GCBRO and Bigfoot forums. So he was wanting to compete with them. And so he was always going over in those forums, posting stuff, but directing people back to the MABRC. So that was part of the game plan. But when it came to the organization itself, first of all, you had to come up with a screen name. I was driver operator, or DO. I started out as fireman until I got promoted at the fire station and changed my name to driver operator. But everybody would come up with a screen name, and I thought that was silly. I was like, if you want to add credibility to what's going on, why create these? Sometimes they were ridiculous. I mean, there were people trying to compete with each other with how silly they could be. 8-bait, splatter, just ridiculous screen names. And I said, that turns it into a circus. I said, and people, and DW's like, well, most people are embarrassed or they don't want people to know their real name. Well, then do you really want them? Let them post their real name. Wouldn't that cut out a lot of bullshit? Now Facebook has everybody's real name. So you join, everybody sees everybody's real name. So why back then could it not be the same way? Why I'm saying that letting people just come on board with any freaking name they create opens it up to abuse and fakery. But I had to concede that that's what he wanted. But when it came to the hierarchy, that's where I came into play on all that. The design was, and I'm going to say this was designed by me. The because I had discussions with DW. I said, look, I said, if you create levels of engagement, first off with coming onto the forum, but then you had to go through a series of jumps and hurdles and answering questions to move over to the membership side. So there's a series of hurdles that you have to jump. I said, so not only that, the people that were in the organization, they start out as junior researchers, but whatever the criteria was set for DW to, you could move from junior researcher to regular researcher to field researcher to top researcher. So you've got these levels you go through, much like a pyramid scam, a pyramid scheme. And then you got your state directors, your Big Jim eventually become the Western multi-division, and DW graduated from, to all the way up to global director, executive director. Just, you start creating these ridiculous titles, but it was for a reason. Because you get these people that come on there and they invest all their time and they make it to the next level. And you get a little badge. DW would dish out little badges that go by your name. So you want people to see, look at all these badges I have. Every expedition I went on, I get a badge. I am now a junior state level researcher. Look at me. And he creates a loyalty. He creates a bunch of flying monkeys around him because they've worked so hard to get in their positions that they do everything to protect him and that organization. No matter how many lies he tells, he knows that he can count on the people under him because it's like a pyramid scheme. Look at it now. Whoever the group of people, I'm going to show you a picture that shows you the top dogs at his organization. And this was 7 years ago. So wonder what they look like now. He's got a guy with a cane that's, 70 years old, can't walk. And that's his audio guru. No training. He's just listened to a lot of audio. That does not make somebody an audio guru. That does not make somebody a technician. That does not make somebody an expert. But when you move up to Missouri State Director, where do you go next? Well, now you're Missouri State Director and you're our audio guru. And you're on our you're on our advisory board, our high-tech advisory board, which is really 6 country bumpkins. It's selling something that's not really there, and then creating a bunch of fake Bigfoot stories just to give you credibility that's not really there. So that's the hierarchy, and it's a pyramid, and it should be obvious that that's what it is, and it buys loyalty. It buys loyalty that you don't deserve by making people succumb because of how much effort they paid to get to where they're at. And when they get to where they're at, they get attention. And I was willing to walk from that because I wasn't there for the attention. Once I knew that I couldn't hang on anymore with Big Jim's fake footprints, I was done. And that story is very convoluted. I'm going to tell you a part of the MABRC. I didn't want to be DW's right-hand man, but when we had our podcasts, where we were doing our little radio shows once a month or once a week or after every event or whatever, there was a lady named Sharon and a lady named Dre. And Dre was lesbian. And so the first I heard that DW was reading people's personal messages and emails through the website, through the forum, was based on that. He said that they were sending pictures back and forth.
And these correspondences were of a sexual nature.
Imagine what the pictures looked like and communications, and he revealed to me that he could read them and see them. And I'm like, what? So I said, why can't I do that? I said, because at that point, the membership was up to like 800. So it was growing really fast, and really a lot. But there were also a lot of arguments, a lot of people causing trouble. And I said, wouldn't it be great if you could go in and just monitor personal messages? Because that's a lot of time where the strife begins, where someone will reach out to somebody else and he'll be like, oh, that MFer DW said this. And I said, so you could curtail a lot of problems if you could catch it at their inception within the messaging systems back and forth. And he said, I would have to move you up to administrative director, or what do you call that person at the top? A moderator. He said, I'd have to give you moderator status. He said, so let's elevate you up to my right-hand man. Whatever you called it. I don't even know what you called it at the time. Executive director assistant or something to that effect. That was only so that I could read people's personal messages. Because even though DW was doing it, he was controlling all of these other aspects of the forum, and it was just a lot. So he said, you could just read them, and if there's a problem, bring it to my attention. So we set it up, elevated me, because I didn't want to be elevated just to be elevated. I was elevated to do a job. And that was it. We were reading people's personal messages. We knew what was going on behind the scenes, and we stopped a lot of trouble before it surfaced that way. And that's all going to come.
All right, everyone. I've been going over all of the items that I want to put on this video, and I see that I'm going to have to do a part 1 and a part 2 because there's going to be so many encounters explained by DW that I'm going to have to go over that I believe were faked. But this one I'm going to have to add in because it was the catalyst to why I left the MABRC in 2015. And like I alluded to earlier, it was all based on Big Jim's footprints and why I believe they were fake. And they were. I mean, it started with the ones that were in the cow pasture that were made up of hoof prints, and I explained that earlier, but that's where it started. And so they progressively got bigger and bigger over time, and there was a point when I think it was 2013 at one of our conferences at the symposium in Oklahoma that we had like 5 or 6 tables just full of footprint cast from Big Jim. I mean, he was just, every time he'd go out, he'd find print after print after print. But the point is, I was the only one being critical of them. I would look at them, and I even made the statement that you can't just pour cast material into the shape of a footprint and make it into a foot. There actually has to be a footprint there, to cast. But it looked like Big Jim was just pouring cast material into the shape of a foot. Any deviation that he would find on the ground, he would just pour material in it and turn it into a Bigfoot, a footprint. So it got to where we had 5, 6, 7 tables full of foot blobs, which is almost as bad as picture blobs. And so I mentioned it to DW that, this is starting to look bad on the MABRC. I I said, when people come in expecting to see stuff and they look on these tables and just see these aberrations that we're calling foot tracks, I said, something's got to give. And DW agreed with me. And so he pulled Big Jim off to the side. I think it was after the conference, and told him that we needed to clean up our Bigfoot casts, because of how it was looking for the whole group. And DW sent me a message, and I told him that I hadn't seen Big Jim on the forum for several days, and DW was laughing. That he said, I told him that half of his tracks weren't good enough to be shown, and Big Jim got a case of the ass and was staying absent from the forum for a few days till he cools off. So it was a really hot topic, and so there was a stretch there where DW did say something to him, but you got to understand, Big Jim claimed to be a biologist, and that was important to DW. He wanted to be able to say, we've got a resident biologist. And I thought if we had a biologist that he would stand head and shoulders above the rest as far as critically viewing what he was putting out there, but not Big Jim. Big Jim was putting out anything and everything as being a track. So it kind of contradicted having a biologist that would do stuff like that. That's why I questioned his degree. Like I said, I've never seen it, but I don't know. So there was a moment in time where DW was on board with the footprints being not footprints and saying something to Big Jim. So there was a moment in time where we truly were both on the same page about doing what was right for the sake of the entire group, and that was pulling Big Jim back on his fake prints. And I say fake prints because DW and I had conversations about it, and he wouldn't have told him to pull those off the tables if he did not believe that they were not fake. So at least we were all on the same page then. So next, we are up on my ridge in the Honubby, and we have a place up there where we called it Jenny's Ridge. So we go back down in there off this ridge, and you are not going to believe what happened that day. Big Jim was pulling back leaves all over the place, and he was finding tracks after tracks after tracks, and would brush the leaves back, and he would say, here's where one set down, here's where his butt set on the ground, and then the heels were dug in the ground over here. And all I was seeing was just rough, rocky ground. But Big Jim was, they're walking through here, and there's footprints all over the place, and there's a butt print here, and I didn't see any of it. It was just rocky ground, and every deviation, every dimple in the ground was a print to Big Jim. And here is the stack of prints that day next to these kids, and look at how big some of them are. I mean, really, folks. You can't make this up. Oh, no, I take that back. You can make this up. Big Jim was making it up every time he went out. So after this batch of prints that Big Jim found, and you should just see the people running around under his umbrella of awesomeness, and it just, Big Jim, you're the footprint king, man. You find them everywhere you go. You're awesome. And it's exactly how I'm explaining it to you. So at this point, I could see the writing on the wall that it was really to the point of being ridiculous. So I told DW, I said, if you don't get on top of this, the prints are going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. He was already finding them in the 23, 24, 25-inch range. Jeff Meldrum himself said that he had never seen an authentic track over 19 inches. So, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that listen to this are going to be like, well, I found one that's 20 and I found one that's 21. Well, was it authentic? Do you know for sure? So I'm just going on what I know. Meldrum never saw a 20-incher that was authentic. And all of a sudden, we've got Big Jim down here in Oklahoma who has found so many 22, 23, 24, 25-inch tracks. It was beyond staggering, the odds that this guy can find so many large prints. But it gets worse. So it got worse because DW sent me a message one time saying, this is when me and DW were friends. We're not friends now, but we were then. So everything that we said was what we thought was, for the betterment of the organization, or at least that's what I thought. DW, on the other hand, he tried to hide a lot, especially when it came to Big Jim, because he needed to have a biologist on staff. But DW did send me a message and say, "You're not going to believe this." And I said, "What?" He said, "Big Jim is claimed to have found several tracks that were like 36 inches long. 3 foot, people, 36 inches long and 22 inches wide." And DW and I laughed our asses off because it's exactly what I said would happen. I said that if you didn't get a hand on Big Jim and what he was doing and set him straight, they're just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so that's why we laughed about it, because it's exactly what I said would happen. And those prints never saw the light of day, because that's when DW finally said something to him about the ridiculous size of the prints that he was finding. Hell, we couldn't afford that much money in casting material. So it was funny, but it just goes to show you 36 inches and 22 inches wide. So fast forward to 2015. This here is the camping trip where the straw finally breaks the camel's back for me. And this is where I hit the road, because Big Jim shows up. And we're all there at Texas, in a Texas location with some Texas friends. And I don't blame the Texas people at all. This was all on Big Jim, because they got excited about it. They wanted it to be a track. So here's what happened. During the day, Big Jim and some of the Texas people go walking off into the woods, and I said to the person sitting next to me, "I bet you he finds a 20-something plus inch track," because at that point, he had been finding them left and right. I think I've laid out the groundwork that, like I said. So I said it as a joke. That's why it's so amazing. I said to the person next to me, "I bet you he finds a 20-something inch, like a 25-inch track in there." And just said it as a joke. And sure enough, it wasn't. 3 minutes later, one of the Texas guys come running out of the woods and says, I need a bucket of plaster. I need a bucket of plaster. Big Jim found a footprint." So here's a short video of Big Jim. There's the print. And Big Jim is about to mix up about 5 gallons of plaster to pour in that divot right there. That's what he's calling a footprint. So you can understand that at this point, I'm pretty pissed. Out of all the conversations that me and DW had about his fake footprints, and especially given the email or the message where he had found some 36-inch ones, just the whole concept that DW had these opportunities to set Jim straight, but he let the attention seeking continue to where now it involves another group of people who you can't blame at all. Big Jim asked the Texas people, especially since he knew that I was pissed, he asked them if they would say that instead of Big Jim finding the print, could they say that they found the print. And so they said that their little 6 or 7 year old grandson found the print. So you're going to lead us to believe that there's 5 or 6 seasoned researchers walking through the woods, and it's the 5-year-old boy that finds this 20-something inch track. Well, it was like a 28-inch track, 26-inch track. But all the timeline shows that the only person in that whole group who was continually finding tracks that large and getting increasingly bigger and bigger was Big Jim. So it was the fact that Big Jim found the print, but he knew that things were coming to a head for me, and I was about to blow the lid on the whole thing. So Big Jim tried to find a way to make it look like somebody else found the track rather than him. And let's for 1 minute say, okay, Big Jim didn't find that print. The little boy really did find the print, and Big Jim just was the one who cleared everything away and covered it up, filled it full of plaster material. So as the resident biologist, he should have said, you know what, this isn't a print. That, you know, so you know, I hate to burst everybody's bubble, but this isn't I'm a biologist, so this isn't a print. But that's not what happened. Big Jim is the one who found it. Big Jim is the one who casted it. It was Big Jim's find. So now we're starting to get into where someone will lie. You know, I've already shown that DW will lie a lot, and now you get the resident biologist, you know, lying. You know, it doesn't matter that he lied because he was turning fake prints in anyways. So, you know, which is worse? So here's where things get convoluted. Back to the forum. Okay. So there was a lady there, and I'll call her lady, but she was more like a man. But her name was Henry Edge, and she was mad at me because of the way that I was addressing Big Jim in this track find. But the thing is, I don't blame her because she had no information about all of the conversations that we had about Big Jim's fake footprints. All she knew is that I blew up on it, and I was having words with DW and Big Jim about, you know, about this print, and so she didn't like the way that I was talking to Big Jim. So she caused a big stink on the forum about how rude I was to Big Jim. But like you said, she didn't know any of the precursors to getting to this print that I knew, that I'd had discussions with DW about, that DW agreed with me about, with Big Jim faking footprints. So she had no understanding of any of those conversations. She only knew that she didn't like that I was being rude to Big Jim, who she thought was a nice guy. So she started a bunch of stink on the forum. And what she did was she sent a message to DW while he was at work through Messenger, talking about it. That's where I saw the message where she was blowing up to DW about how I talked to Big Jim. So when I mentioned earlier in this video about me, of us being able to access people's private messages, so I addressed what she said to DW. I told him that he needed to tell her about all of our previous conversations about the fake footprints and Big Jim and all of that situation. I demanded that DW talk to her so that she would have a better understanding of why, you know, she thought I was being rude to him. And I also responded to Henry Edge through Messenger about the message that she sent to DW, because I wasn't waiting for DW to get off work. I was trying to get to the bottom of it. So I messaged her and was answering her questions about her post to DW, and that's how it all came to light, that she discovered that we were reading her messages publicly, and she wanted to know how I knew what she said without, because she only sent the message to DW. So that's when the cat was out of the bag on the message system, where DW and I would read people's emails and messages on the forum. And so that could no longer be hidden. So I was ready to get it all out in the open and let's discuss this and get this figured out, because it was not looking good. And that's when DW, he was embarrassed. He was embarrassed to admit to the people that he and I had been looking at their private messages. So he said it was just me. He had to backtrack a little bit and say, well, that he used to do that, but he doesn't do it anymore. So you see, he had to backtrack like a liar would, rather than just admit to everything and let's get it squared up and get everything from that point forward straightened out. He wasn't willing to do that. And so that's why I walked. So I think this is how I'm going to end this video. So this will be part 1, and part 2 is going to be a multitude of sightings that DW claims to have had that I can easily debunk as being fake. So there's probably going to be 4 or 5 evaluations and lay out all the evidence and the timelines of some of his sighting reports and his contradictions. He lists multiple contradictions on his Bigfoot stories. So that's all going to be in part 2. Thank you.
For the